the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, episode 14.
Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.
Welcome to another edition of the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Ray. It is so good to have you today. And if you're hearing this, I'm probably at the NAPE conference, and you should be too. So if you're there, check out the show notes, and you can find out how to contact me, or hit me up on Twitter, email, whatever. It's all there in the show notes. If you're at NAPE, please let me know. And this podcast is 7 days away from the LNG Summit. And so make sure, if you haven't registered, to go to the LNG Summit and register. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Today, our guest comes to us all the way from Lithuania, a good friend of mine, Vejuna, and we're going to talk about LNG. And at the end of the show, you will catch that there is discussions of me and her co-hosting a podcast on energy issues in Europe. So for our European listeners, we'd love to hear from you and say, hey, this is what we want you guys to talk about. What's going on in Europe that's important for you? globalenergyleaders@gmail.com. Shoot me an email or find me at Twitter at Ryan Ray Sr., and we'd love to hear from you about that. Without further ado, let's get into some LNG discussion. Well, Vejuna, we've been talking about doing this for a long time. It's so good to have you on the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Ryan, for having me here today. And I'm really proud to finally be able to speak to you and to broadcast this wonderful podcast with you. I've been doing today really fine. How are you?
Doing well. Can't complain. So before we were talking here offline, give the audience a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into the energy business.
Well, it's actually a funny story because, as you know, I'm the director of communications in an oil and gas company that hosts business events, wisdom events. And I started my career as a journalist. I was working with political, economical matters. And, then started to have some interest in maritime and oil and gas.
Okay, and just kind of give us a little bit of perspective of, you're in Lithuania right now, I'm over here in Texas. It's a little bit of a contrast as far as when you think of oil and gas industry. Lithuania is not necessarily considered, the oil and gas mecca. So what about being over there in Europe got your attention?
Well, yes, Lithuania is not the mecca of oil and gas and not marine as well. Maybe that is why most of our events are hosted elsewhere. And, as you know, one event will be hosted in Texas, in Houston, less than a month away. We're interested mostly in the US and European markets, also with Asian countries as well, because they have a lot of reserves, a lot of industry companies, and as well, lots of interesting projects and innovations.
Absolutely. And if you hear people around the world talking right now, when they talk about oil and gas specifically, the big talk is in LNG, and you have a lot of experience in LNG. So kind of set the table for us. What's going on in LNG globally speaking, and what can we expect as we go the next 5 to 10 years down the road?
Well, yeah, LNG is actually rapidly playing a bigger role in the energy sector, and the market for it is expected to grow at around 5% annually. And, my companies that I am working with predicted that by 2020, the market will have expanded by 50%. That is a huge amount. Seriously, the number is amazing. And this number offers a lot of opportunity for new companies, for service providers, and so on. Even though this year, as it started, a lot of consultancy companies predicted that it's going to be a bad year because loss of profit. As you should have seen, Shell just released their annual quarterly report, and it was really a loss in profit. After a year, they had a significant reduce of 7%, if I'm not mistaken, in profit. So that is not so promising. But the next year shall bring a lot of new projects and new possibilities, because there will be expands in the LNG market, and the projects, as I mentioned before, they offer a lot of opportunities and a lot of profit. If everything goes well. And you should have known, as I mentioned before when we were talking before the podcast, that this year we'll start a new wave of projects, oil and gas projects in Nigeria, in Russia, Turkey, Kazakhstan, and so on. And there are a lot of money involved, a lot of people, a lot of innovations. So I do believe that this year will be better than expected, and that it will bring good things and not misfortune, and not as expected in those analysis and things that we were talking about in February and January.
Okay, and so for someone who may be in renewables or even in oil and gas, they're not really familiar with LNG, because when you say oil and gas, that's a big field. Why is LNG getting all the attention right now?
Because sustainability is one of the main points right now. As you know, in the maritime sector, it was issued that until 2020, all maritime vessels should be sustainable as much as it is possible, and liquefied natural gas could be used in maritime as a fuel. So that is very interesting, and that is going to be discussed at the LNG US Summit that we are hosting on the 23rd, 24th of February in Texas, Houston, as I mentioned before. So maritime sector is actually very interested in LNG and, of course, oil and gas, because as the profits went down, LNG is the best opportunity for them, I think.
We'll get back to the interview in just a second, but first, let's hear from our sponsor.
For over 20 years, R² Global has served the energy and infrastructure industries. With offices in Texas, Alabama, and Louisiana, R² Global offers engineering, survey, right-of-way, and GIS solutions. For more information, please visit www.gor2.com.
Okay, and let's get back into it. Absolutely. And so for our audience members who are in the vendor side of the business, they're saying, okay, wow, LNG, we've heard it on the Global Energy Leaders podcast a few times now, that LNG is kind of the future, but I don't really know where to start. What are some of the big companies that are players in this industry that you may want to look into and do research and say, okay, these are the kind of companies that I want to target if I want to transition my business to LNG?
Regarding the LNG, if you talk about the companies, they are major players and they're well known. If you talk about the industry companies, there are BP, Shell, Total, and many others. If you look further, like the EPC contractors, Worley Parsons, that own like 40% of all the market, Technip, and so on. So there are a lot of companies that went from oil and gas to LNG and are covering not only oil and gas, but also maritime as well.
Okay, so you mentioned Russia just a minute ago, and every time you turn on the news here in the U.S. and probably abroad, Russia is always being talked about, is because there's always some kind of tension with Russia in the U.S. or Russia in the Middle East. What's going on with the Russian project you mentioned?
Yes, I mentioned that this year is going to be very interesting because, seven oil and gas projects, major projects, are going to start. And one of them is regarding Russia. That project is estimated like $50 billion. And it is going to start this year and the first phase will last for about 2 years. That project is going to be made by Russia with Turkey, and they finally agreed to push ahead with the Stream pipeline. And it's really interesting, and I really hope that this project will move forward and bring profits and new opportunities for Turkish Stream, for Gazprom, and many others.
Absolutely. Okay, let's transition here with just one or two more things before we let you go. One of the things we see here stateside is there's a lot of talk about renewable energy. I know that's not necessarily your forte, but what are you seeing in Europe as far as renewable energy goes?
Okay, so regarding renewables, I'm not actually, as you mentioned before, really qualified of this, but there are really a lot of interest in the solar panels. And as I mentioned before, LNG is even considered as a renewable. But well, if we look at the power at the windmills and so on, it's not that usual type of renewable. But as a professional working in oil and gas and maritime, I would still consider LNG because it is more sustainable and it offers a lot of possibilities for the oil and gas industry to be a lot greener and to care more about the environment and the people.
Okay, great. So I want to let everybody go with this kind of note and just kind of make a quick announcement here is that a couple things. One, you will be, as you mentioned, at the LNG US Summit here by the time this podcast is released, 7 days. And so that will be in Houston, Texas, and we will link to that in the show notes so they can come and meet yourself and meet me there. We'll all be there. Also, we talked about and have been talking about, and I think we can now actually release it, that we are going to be doing a energy-based show for Europe. And so we're going to have a show where we talk about European energy issues and, how the politics and everything that's involved with energy in Europe. And we're working on that, and we're kind of excited about it. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I am really excited as you, Ryan. And as you mentioned before, the LNG US Summit that is going to be held on the 23rd, 24th of February in Houston, Texas, is going to be a blast because, well, it's an exceptional business platform that unifies industry leaders from around the globe. And this business event is, well, flawlessly executed and though allows to discuss significant industry problems and establish valuable connections with skilled professionals from major companies. So it's a great opportunity to come to listen to great speakers like Oliver Tuckerman that I mentioned before, Paul Sullivan from Worley Parsons, and many more exceptional people, and maybe to meet them even in person. So it's a good opportunity. Visit our website, lng-usa.com, and find out more. And well, as you mentioned, news about Europe, about energy sector in Europe will be brought by us later on.
Absolutely. And you will be posting periodic blogs on globalenergymedia.com as well. So we look forward to that. Look forward to meeting you here in just, as this podcast is released, 7 short days, and hope that plenty of the audience decides to show up and gets to learn a lot of valuable education from this summit. I'm excited about it. And there's a lot of top industry leaders that are going to be there. And so look forward to seeing you in just a few weeks. And thank you again for coming on.
Thank you, Ryan, for having me. And thank you for listening.
Okay, and so great talk today. Thanks, Vejuna, so much for coming on. Really enjoyed the discussion about LNG. Guys, if you're not in the LNG business, you need to look at how can you enter that market space right now. There's a lot of positive talk there. There's a lot of long-term talk there, which are the two things that you want to hear in this kind of industry. For someone like myself who is in the consulting side and not on the company side, we're always looking, how do we be opportunistic? And so LNG is definitely one of those marketplaces that we want to get into. Also, there's opportunities around the world in this market. So we need to take a look at that and say, how can we be opportunistic in different parts of the world, stateside and abroad? So keep all that in mind. Again, if you haven't registered for the LNG Summit, we will link to that in the show notes so you can have your opportunity to be there. I'd love to meet with you if you come. And so email me your thoughts. Is LNG the future that everybody says it is? globalenergyleaders@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And next week, Gregory Zuckerman comes on to talk about the book, The Frackers. This book is amazing. I can't recommend it enough. I gave it to a friend the other day, and he said, Ryan, it was great. It was everything you said. I read it in 2 days. And that's just the kind of book it is. So if you've been in oil and gas for the past 10 to 15 years, this book is for you. He will come on and talk about the book. We are giving away that book this month. All you have to do is leave a written review in iTunes. Simple as that. And you will have a chance to win this book. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, keep climbing.
Thanks for listening to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.